For me, urban mobility is about being creative, being resourceful.
What is the right direction for us to really move forward?
Talking to people is more inspiration than data.
So the technology should be seamless for everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our She's Mercedes Female Creator Panel on Urban Mobility in 2021. My name's Yasmin Blair, and I will be guiding you through this panel. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We are very excited to be able to come together as a community. Plus, we are also celebrating 5 years of She's Mercedes, and we're here to celebrate female empowerment. And in doing so, we look forward to some fresh perspectives from our amazing panelists. So what is today going to be all about? We will be speaking about changes in our requirements and behavior when it comes to urban mobility. And we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered a big shift towards means of individual transportation, and this change of routine we are experiencing and that extreme need for individualization of mobility might be reduced with the rising number of vaccinations, but what might be here to stay are people's mindsets. They have shifted drastically. And what's more, not only due to the pandemic, but apart from that, we have not only become very conscious and aware of climate change, and now it is high time for our experts, who all have very diverse and very interesting backgrounds, to share their insights, their new ideas, and their learnings. And I would like to begin by introducing Kochkorn Borakam. Welcome, Koch.
Thank you for having me today. Sawadika, my name is Kochkorn Borakam. I'm a landscape architect from Bangkok, Thailand. And as you may know that Bangkok is one of the most at-risk cities from the climate change. So my take on urban mobility would be we cannot move forward without thinking about climate change.
It's our great pleasure. And moving along, I would like to introduce Cherie Renee Thomas. Welcome, Cherie.
Hello, my name is Cherie Renee Thomas. I am the author of 9 Bar Blues and the editor of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. As a former New Yorker and a person who is a native of Memphis, for me, urban mobility is about being creative, being resourceful, and also about putting women in the forefront of it. Women, I think, have a unique perspective when it comes to design and technology, and we should have our voices be a part of that creation as much as possible.
And I would also like to welcome Manuela Papadopoulou. Welcome, Manuela. She is from Designated Driver. Thank you so much for joining us today, Manuela.
Thank you so much. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Designated Driver. It's a startup that I built 2 years ago, located in Portland, Oregon. And I built Designated Driver with the goal of creating software for self-driving cars. So teleoperations is the safety net of autonomous vehicles. And when autonomy is failing, teleoperations kicks in and supports the vehicle to move forward. So my take on urban mobility is centered around safety, but also user experience.
Thank you, Manuela. And last but not least, we look forward to welcoming Marianne Reeb. Marianne is a futurologist at Mercedes-Benz. Her job is all about looking into the future, more specifically into the future of mobility. We're looking forward very much to your input. Thank you for joining us, Marianne.
I'm working as a future researcher for Mercedes-Benz for over 20 years now. And be sure you can always find something new in the future if you work so long on such topic. What are we doing in questions of urban mobility? We have been talking to a lot of cities all over the world in the last years, asking them what is your strategy for the future, what are your goals, what are your principles. And our job is not only to do the research, but also to bring it into the company and explain it to our colleagues who are building services, cars, and working on strategies. And this is really an exciting job, and I love to share my experiences and my knowledge and discuss it with you ladies. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. And I do agree, we definitely need to stay creative in these times. Maybe if we have time later on, we can also speak of the responsibilities that cities have themselves to offer us the proper infrastructure for us to break our habits in the first place. So maybe we can look at it from that side. But first, I would like to hop right into the discussion. Thank you again, Marion, for that opening. And I would like to begin by reflecting, ladies, with all of you. We've all been confronted with situations completely new to us, none of us had any experience with. So starting off, I would like to know how the pandemic has actually affected each of your lives, and perhaps it has even altered your approach to urban mobility. I would like to begin with you, Koch. How have the lockdowns in Thailand altered your life in Bangkok, for example, and how has this affected your work as a landscape architect?
Especially as a Bangkok scale, that you can imagine that I never see Bangkok without tourists before. So this is like the first time that the city yes, the city is only, like we only here together as a resident. And there are so many questions that rise. And if you ever come to Bangkok, you will know how traffic congested we are, you know how concrete we are as a city. Even to walk on the street is already difficult. So I just feel that this pandemic has really raised the issue of the walkable city, the bike infrastructure. Do we really need it? And especially, yes, we really need those infrastructure to be in place to really serve the residents of Bangkok. And I just feel that since we use a lot of car and personal mobility is still our first priority, and I just feel that we need to rethink of how we use this, the low carbon emission vehicle that need to play an important role to the future of how we move our city, how we go about the future of Bangkok.
Thank you so much, Koch. You were basically underlining a point that I was just trying to make earlier, that there is an infrastructural problem in many cities. I think Bangkok is probably a wonderful example. And these are problems that were already here before the pandemic. So this is, in many cities, maybe where the work has to begin. Thank you for that, Koch. Manuela, personally, I think I've already mentioned it, that I know not only winners and beneficiaries, but also people who feel left behind ever since the crisis has come up. How has 2020 affected your business? Has it actually accelerated things, or has it much rather brought things to a halt? And do you also see this huge gap between the beneficiaries and the people left behind?
So I really wanted to emphasize the fact that Mariana's points earlier, the fact that the pandemic allowed us to help each other more, come for one another and help, also change the behavior, but also made us more resilient. And because of that, we emphasized a lot more on keeping the business alive and growing it. And we were fortunate at Designated Driver to have grown the business and increase our customer base and bring teleoperations, because it is such an important component of our today and the future, the autonomous vehicle development, as well as the software behind it, its core components. So for us at Designated Driver, we have grown the business, but also we have seen a little step back in terms of expanding to other areas like Germany, for example. We were working with a German customer in Karlsruhe area, and I was telling Marianne the other day, we're gonna come to Germany again and open an office there. Well, unfortunately, COVID didn't allow us to do that. We focused a lot more on simulation. We worked a lot more in our garages and in the office one by one. So I think that this year has allowed us to become more resilient, help grow the business, but also rethink how we are focusing on our resourcing and using our resources. And I think that applies also to our personal lives, how we are making better with what we've got in the home rather than take another trip to the grocery store. I think 2020 was good, but also bad. It allowed us to become better humans, help each other more, and be more resilient, but also had allowed us to rethink what exactly is that we need.
What I take away from your answer, from your response just now, Manuela, is a lot more positivity than negativity, which is great when it comes to an outlook for this coming year, because there are so many unknown factors that we're dealing with right here. Cherie, maybe to perhaps kind of move to a world of fiction where we can paint everything as we like. I have always been fascinated by George Orwell's 1984 because it simply painted a picture and predicted things that came true in the 90s and in the new millennium. So Cherie, from your point of view as a fictional author, was this crisis ever a scenario you had in mind, or could you ever have imagined this for a science fiction novel?
As a science fiction writer, it is pandemics are a bit of a trope. So it's something that's very common that it's written about. What is uncommon is for you to feel like that you're going to be living in it, that it's going off the pages is in your reality. So that is the thing that was very strange. I even have written a story that was set here in Memphis that wasn't a pandemic, but it was a situation where the sun stopped shining only in the city of Memphis. And so it creates a great deal of fear and panic and confusion, and people have to figure out, as everyone has said, you have to be creative, right? And you also find out that even the most unsocial person is a human and needs others, needs some type of comfort, some type of connection, communication, to be able to stay calm in the face of the strain. So it was a little surprising to realize that something that we normally think of as a science fictional context, at least in at the scale that it has occurred, because there's always some kind of apocalyptic situation or dystopian world that's happening somewhere on the planet. That's the unfortunate thing, right? You may be living in a very stable, peaceful place, but there are other parts of the world that have a lot of strife. For me, I was thinking about how, at least here in the States, it revealed the gaps between the classes that we can normally overlook when we are watching the same movies, following the same celebrities, using the same technology, right? It seems like you're all together. But when the pandemic hit, it became very clear what cities were working and which cities were not. And we had to redefine what it means to be a city and who is the city for, right? And how do we adapt it so that more people can survive and thrive in it in the face of this challenge. So
yeah, I really agree with Cherie that the climate change is it's not an abstract things anymore. It's actually happening in our face every day. And really agree that not only in US, but in Thailand and in many developing countries, it's really underlined the inequity that we are facing for gender, for the incomes, and for how we go about our city.
So basically, this pandemic is shining a spotlight on all the inequality that we have been dealing with, or should have perhaps more intensively been dealing with before we got struck by this pandemic, just shining a light on that. Marian, how has 2020 affected the urban mobility ecosystem as such, if we speak of that, and how has it altered the way you work at Mercedes-Benz?
We started to work and discuss scenarios for the time after the pandemic. So we met virtually, my team and I, and we discussed scenarios for 2025. What we could see at the moment was that, for example, all those new options like trip hailing, car sharing, and so on, they all suffered from it because no one wanted to share his trip with someone he did not know. So these new things, and therefore they looked for new chances like the Balkönig or other things. And so some parts of the ecosystems really suffered from, and other like bike and car and so on were the winners. But from our view on 2025, we are very, very sure that everything will be like before the pandemic, or even better for parts of mobility, will feel more safe in 4 to 5 years. We will have solutions also for the public transport sector, not only the private car. And my favorite scenario of 4 we described was that people stay with their new routines, and what means it will cause less mobility in the city. If I only go to work with a car on 2 days and not on 5, this will help urban mobility.
We look forward to that development. We're going to keep an eye out. And Manuela, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned that there are also opportunities, or that things are altering, of course, not only for the better, but coming out of such a disruptive year as 2020, where the mobility industry is dealing with lots of uncertainty and has been. Do you predict that 2021 is going to be even more challenging, or is this perhaps even more so the perfect time for unexpected opportunities and for perhaps altering certain systems that need to be altered anyway?
I think it's both. It's both challenging, but also allows us to become more creative with what we have, what we can do, and focus on the things that actually matter the most, which is develop technology and bring products to market that help everybody, no matter what their background is, no matter what their financial ability is. So for us at Designated Driver, we're going to continue working a lot more, because that's where the demand is, with agriculture, with yard automation, with transporting goods, and allowing autonomous vehicles that are being developed in these areas to become safer. And I think it's going to be an interesting year, 2021, because now we have a vaccine that's working, and now we're trying to bring people back to work in various forms, but we have to do that safely.
Manuela, I love how you have such a positive view upon things. And when I just asked you that question, I was thinking, oh, come on, Manuela, inspire us. And you did. You inspired us to keep our focus on the opportunities we have. And I'd like to stick to inspiration and to passion, because that is one of our slogans at She's Mercedes. Fuel your passion. I'm sure you've heard that. And I would like to know where you get your passion from in the real world, but also in fiction. So Cherie and Koch, you are the two I would like to ask the same question. Koch, why don't we start off with you? When you're designing future urban scenarios, where do you draw inspiration from, and what does your creative process look like? And then I would like to compare that to Cherie, where you get your inspiration from, where you draw passion from, and what your creative process looks like. But let's start out with Koch, please.
As many predictions from the scientists and from the researcher that Bangkok will be underwater as soon as like 2030, and I just feel that it sounds like a disaster, but I just feel that it's kind of give us a sense of futuristic a little bit, that in the near future we won't have land that we drive, that we stand, and all the city would have to deal a lot with water. And I just think about from now what we can do to really create the creativity with the reality and confront the reality of climate change or whatever we haven't expect or uncertainty that we still don't know that is gonna come true. But I just feel that the reality of the flood and the reality of how we have to deal with more water or less water in a drought period have to become with the creative solution, so we can move forward and find better solution for the city.
So Koch, does that mean that during your creative process, you're actually picturing that city underwater as a sort of modern water world already, because it's so close, or predictions are saying 2030, that's very soon. Are you actually moving away from the city as it looks today and looking towards a future scenario?
Well, I just feel that I'm looking into the past, because in our history, we are the culture that used to live harmoniously with water. But with this urban context that we haven't think through the water, and it's like a big concrete patch on top of the Delta land. And I just feel that it seems like a futuristic, but for me, it's sometimes we have to know our past and really learn the way that we used to live with water, and kind of mix the wisdom from the past, from our culture, from our ancestor, and really look forward for the uncertainty. And we need to find the right balance and the right mix of that.
Great point. Thank you, Koch. Cherie, what does your creative work process look like, and where do you get your inspiration from? How do you fuel your passion?
Oh, when I'm creating, writing for myself, because I do two different things. Writing is one hat I wear, and then editing is a whole nother mind space. So for writing, when I'm creating my own work, I'm thinking about story. I'm thinking about human stories. And so much of my time is spent reading and listening outside of my field completely. So I may read natural science magazines and, or find an interesting article in National Geographic, or maybe a photograph that captures me. So the first part of it is the pre-writing stage, when you're just thinking and you have a question. What if, right? So in the case of Koch's situation, there are writers who thought of what if, we had to live with water in a different way? What if the water was a part of us all around us, and we were congruent with it, we were natural with it, it was a part of something, and not something that should be shut out, but something that is welcomed in, and we have adapted living with water. And so you take the what if question, and with science fiction and speculative fiction, the answers aren't, based on only reality. It's based on your imagination, and it's you can draw on ancient wisdom because our knowledge is generational, right? We pass it on from generation to generation, and it changes based on our environment, right? For me, it's just gathering, it's quilting, gathering the images, the ideals, and then something will hit that I can't let go of. And that's when I go and start drafting it until characters present themselves and I'm able to explore it in a full way.
Thank you, Cherie. Now, you said something so important, that part of your inspirational part of work is listening. I think if we would all spend more time listening, we wouldn't be in some of the messes that we are in today. So thank you for that. Now, Marion, I'm assuming your main source of inspiration as a futurologist is probably a very rational source, data. So maybe you can explain to us and to the viewers, how can the data that we collect in cities today make them better, safer places? For example, improve the user experience, asking as a consumer on my behalf. And would you say, Marion, that smart cities are always automatically better cities?
Depends on how you define smart city. But first of all, my main source of inspiration is my crystal ball, for sure. Sorry, I'm a futurist. And yes, full data as well, but also listening and reading a lot. Talking to people is more inspiration than data. Data is not inspirational for me sometimes, but we need data. And to come back to your question for the so-called smart cities, we have three different developments in smart cities we have been watching the last years, and data is only one part of it, but an important part. So, and we are using, and we are asked, we as a company are asked by cities like London or Amsterdam, for example, could your cars are collecting a lot of data anonymously, for sure, which could help us make our city a little bit safer. Because if some of our driving assistants react to a special situation in the city, if Amsterdam asks, could we have these data and find out how we can make our streets a little bit safer? And this is one of my favorite examples, how things you have. You don't have to collect them, especially we do have them in the cars. You don't know what is the driver of the car or so, but you can collect them and make the city a little bit better.
This is actually a question I'd like to ask all four of you, if you could answer very briefly so we can move along because we are actually running out of time. But from all of your perspectives, how can technology improve urban mobility? Will modern technology always improve urban mobility, and who actually drives the technological change, that sort of change, Manuela?
Urban mobility is very important because it allows you to help everybody, whether it's students going to school or people going to work or seniors that are going to the grocery store. So the technology should be seamless for everyone. You shouldn't learn a command on how to open the door for a vehicle that you're getting in or learn a new language. It should be very easy to use. I think this was the theme of today's discussion. It should be easy to use, whether it's in a city or how you're designing a city or a building or a vehicle or a piece of technology, but it should also help everybody. So when you are developing a product, you have to keep in mind your entire audience. You have to keep in mind end users that are people that have just moved to a new country or people that are just learning that language. So you have to create products, and especially in urban mobility, you have to develop vehicles that have a seamless user experience.
Thank you for that, Manuela. Cherie, maybe if I may ask you to briefly add, part of my question was also who drives technology or who drives that technological change. Now, Manuela, of course, you said it's for all of us. So based on that, we all are the driving factors in technological change, the entire world globally. But which role do we play, perhaps specifically as a woman? What would you say, Cherie?
I think women have because of the way that we're socialized, we have most of us have a way of thinking about the world. So even if you are not, a guy or guardian for another person or a caretaker for someone else, you have been socialized from a small age to think of others, to think, or at least to perform as if you are thinking of others. So there's that aspect of it. So when you have women leaders or women in the room, women at the table, they will often ask questions that will remind others of the people who are left out of the conversation. Well, what if a person is coming on with children? Then this technology needs to be public transportation needs to be a little bit larger because they're going to have different types of bags, not just a briefcase or newspaper. So, and there are also this ideal, I was thinking about this ideal that stories, when you write short stories or you write fiction, you're often asked to write from the character that has the most to lose or the character who is the most vulnerable, because it makes a more interesting story, because we love as readers to watch how they face their challenges, and then we can feel like we're overcoming them as well. And so I feel like when we're talking about technology and driving that technology, we should also think about the people who may need it the most. So how do you create technology that, as Manuela was saying, it's more user-friendly for everyone?
Thank you, Cherie. And Katja, how do you ensure that the places you design and the landscape you design are not only functional, but pleasurable and enjoyable to such a broad amount of people? And how may modern technologies perhaps help you do so?
And I just feel that as I'm a landscape architect, fighting to adding more green to such a concrete city, like the city that really addict to growth. And I just feel that if the tendency go this way, it's not necessary that the design or the intention of being a good human have to going further and further on. And I just feel that in this situation, in this pandemic, is such a it's such a big pause for all of us to really think like who driven all this change, all this growth, and what is the right direction for us to really move forward as a human using technology, using data, and using many things. So yes, I just feel that we really need to think hard who driven all this growth and move to the better future, and for all of us, not for any particular benefit from the small group of people.
Now, sticking to you, Koch, that does sound like you would wish for a complete change of mindset, or for us to just keep in mind what we have learned through this pandemic. And that actually brings us to the closing, ladies. Thank you, first of all, for all of your input, all of the insight. Since we started out with looking back and with looking at 2020, I would like to end by looking towards the future, and hopefully with some positive perspective here towards the end. Most of all, I'm wondering which changes will remain new and arguably improved, and which may return the way they were. And Koch, I would like to pick up where you stopped on people's mindsets perhaps changing. Do you think there will be a lasting impact on our mindsets, for example, our preferences also in terms of urban environments? Or do you think we're going to return to normal, whatever that may be, as soon as the pandemic has passed?
I'm really afraid that we will return to our old normal, or whatever normal for us, but not normal for other people or other being in the environment. And I think that we all need to look positive to the future, and we have to be very committed to our goodness in human, that we are the being that can learn from what we have done, and we can improve to be a better person, to a better world, because there's so many following generation that really questioning what kind of world are we handing to them right now.
Thank you so much, Koch. Closing, Marian as well as Manuela, I would like to ask you a question, and Cherie, you're going to like this one. Urban aerial mobility. Because to me, it's still sort of a spacey picture that I have in my mind when I hear urban aerial mobility. And Manuela and Marian, I would like to ask you, before you give us your closing words, to tell me, is this far distant fiction, or is urban aerial mobility soon to be normal? Maybe let's start with Marian.
I think we often have not the right expectations. Imagine a city where 10% of the whole traffic is in the air. No one would like to live there. So I think for really special use cases, and I think more for goods transport than for people's transport, for example, I can imagine, because we talk a lot about urban mobility. We do not talk about, or had not the chance today to talk about urban logistics, which is as important as well. And so I think, yes, we will have, probably not in Europe first, probably first in China or Dubai, or you name it. We will see such use case that it will be possible technologically, but I hope and I believe it will not be main mobility in cities. In that case, I would really move to the countryside.
I agree with Marianne. Fundamentally, you have to ask yourself, what problem are we trying to solve? Right? Are we trying to solve the problem for everybody, or just for a segment of very wealthy individuals that have to move very fast to meetings? And I can't envision that urban mobility is going to help people commute to work or go to the grocery store. So I think it's a very expensive technology that doesn't help the environment, doesn't help the masses, and it's not helping solve any problems. So I also will move with you, Marianne. Maybe we'll move to Garmisch or somewhere in Austria. But from a technology standpoint, yes, it's it's capable. The technology is there. We have a lot of sensors, lidars, radars. The software is there. It's just we've also talked today about what problems are we trying to solve. How will this enrich our lives? How will this make us better individuals and human beings for the next generation to enjoy planet Earth?
Thank you, Manuela. Let me ask all of you one closing question, and then if you like, you can make one last closing remark. But there are urban experts who speak of the so-called Great Urban Reset out there. And they're saying that right now is the perfect time for this Great Urban Reset because we're already questioning the status quo of basically everything right now, everything we know, or a lot of what we know about urban mobility. So what do you make of that?
I think that a door is closing. Things are accelerating very fast, and there are forces that want you to go back to the old normal uncritically because it was profitable. And so we're at a place now where a lot of things are being renegotiated. And if you know anything about negotiation, you better strike while the iron is hot. So the door is open now. I would encourage people to unite together and to have those difficult conversations and talk about the things that they feel are important, because the pandemic did open the door for us to see some things with a new light, with some new realism. So I think this is a great time to continue the conversations and do that hard work to get some things better, to improve things while we can do it, because definitely there is going to be a force to try to get things back and to shut those conversations down.
Thank you, Cherie. Do we have some final closing words and your take on the Great Urban Reset from you as well, Koch?
Yes, I really agree with Cherie, and I just feel that when you talk about reset, is you have to allow something to die or shut down, and it's like a phase of reborn. And I just feel that this is such a big opportunity for all of us to really rethink and reborn again, together again.
I do hope we make use of that opportunity. Manuela, your closing words, please. You mentioned earlier, I'm positive. I have to be. I have to be. I have a responsibility of a company, but also in people. I do hope that we take the opportunity to rethink what is important for us, what is important for the next generations, and build a technology that is going to allow us to enjoy this earth longer. So with that, I promise that with Designated Driver, we're going to continue to have this big focus on developing software that is safe, secure, and for the benefit of the planet and people. Once again, positivity all the way. Thank you so much for that, Manuela. We're looking forward to seeing Designated Driver and how you develop throughout this year and in the future to come. Now, Marion, our futurologist from Mercedes-Benz, you know that what you say counts now. So you're the one who's going to tell us, is there reason to hope? Can we look forward to 2021?
For each individual, probably things will not change so much in summer or autumn or so. But what I know from my experience, that this pandemic, this time, was a collective imprint for new generations, and that will change their mindsets. And we see them in Europe with Fridays for Future and so on, and they make a difference, and they force politicians and companies and so on to change their behavior. And this is my hope. This new generation who made in very, very young years this experience, I'm really so sad for them, because a year for them is much more than for me, but they will make the difference, I'm sure.
Thank you so much, Marion. Thank you, Manuela. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you, Koch. Thank you to all of you for joining us today, for making this a fantastic panel, for sharing with us your expertise. It's greatly appreciated, especially in this time and age. It's extremely important for us to keep up that connection to our community, to reach out to one another, make sure we don't neglect to keep our focus on female empowerment, which makes this panel all the more valuable and special. So thank you so much for being a part of that. And thank you, of course, to all of our viewers viewers for joining us as well for this She's Mercedes Female Creator panel. Be sure to keep an eye out for further exciting content. Be sure to head right over to our website for more information and to join the celebration of 5 years of She's Mercedes. Everybody stay healthy. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Goodbye to all of my panelists. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Yasmin.
Bye. Thank you.